This is Drosophila suzukii, commonly called spotted wing Drosophila or simply SWD. It gets its names from the two black spots the males have on each wing. And in spite of its tiny size, it has caused enormous problems for blueberry growers across the Pacific Northwest.
The biggest pest by far, at least insect-wise, of blueberries is spotted wing Drosophila.
For like the insect issues, it's primarily spotted wing Drosophila. That's the real big one that we spray the most for.
Because SWD is a relatively new pest, there simply aren't a lot of options for management other than multiple applications of pesticides.
Typically, industry standards are weekly 7 to 10 day spray cycles of insecticides and broad spectrum insecticides on these insects. The industry has largely recognized this as not a really sustainable approach to producing blueberries. It has been kind of an emergency response to this invasive pest.
In order to reduce the effects these pesticides may have on beneficial insects, experts in the region are using creative IPM practices to make sure their efforts to control spotted wing aren't harming their local and managed pollinators. Bees are present on blueberries early in the season when the blueberries are in bloom and bees are collecting pollen and nectar. It's during this time that the biggest risk to growers is not spotted wing Drosophila, but diseases such as mummyberry, which are managed with preventive fungicides. Spotted wing Drosophila becomes a problem after bloom, when the berries are growing, but even if bees aren't busy pollinating the crop, that doesn't mean they aren't still around. Flowers in and around the blueberry field are still attractive to pollinators and beneficial insects. Creating a robust IPM plan from scratch can seem overwhelming, and it's hard to know where to get started. A good place to start is identifying your goals. What are you trying to accomplish at this site, and what are the pests that will keep you from reaching those goals? This will determine the next steps of how to use scouting and record keeping to make management decisions.
What are you growing? What are you growing? Who are you growing it for? What is your general practices? What is your general comfort level with, taking on certain risks that are inherent to not spraying, essentially, if you are kind of letting the natural systems just kind of take control on their own.
But we have a very intensive program for scouting for that particular pest, where we're checking fruit in every block 2 to 3 times a week for larvae and making adjustments to our spray program based off of that.
So we are in these fields multiple times a week, pulling fruit samples from areas of the field we know that are most susceptible to SWD, and monitoring that very closely so that if we get any detection of SWD in the field, that a application could go on at that point. But otherwise, we can back off on a calendar program and address things more on a as-needed basis.
Action thresholds are a critical concept for integrated pest management because they determine when to take appropriate action. If pest pressure isn't high enough, you might not need to do anything at all. However, thresholds can change based on your site, your pest, and your goals. They aren't necessarily the same for everybody.
But it's a pest that has almost a zero tolerance policy at packing facilities, and we've been challenged with trying to get back to a more sustainable way of managing that pest without damaging the beneficial insects that we rely on so heavily as farmers. There isn't really an economic threshold for this pest. I mean, I guess a lot of people would say it's anything more than zero. But we've gotten to the point where we feel pretty comfortable with widening intervals between spray applications. We're able to widen the intervals significantly based off of the scouting that we're doing. So we're not, we're not just spraying weekly. We can go sometimes 2 or 2.5 weeks and we feel comfortable doing that if we're not detecting any larvae in the fruit.
Any data that you collect from scouting should be designed so that it can be used for both short-term and long-term decision-making.
Just generally trying to have standardized protocols in the field so that the data that's coming out is comparable from person to person, from field to field, from time frame to time frame.
If you use insecticides as part of an IPM plan, consider how they might affect other pest management strategies, such as natural enemies. You also need to consider how they might affect other organisms in the environment, such as pollinators or other wildlife.
Generally speaking, though, we definitely are aware of the impact of the insecticides we're using, what they would have, what impact they would have on the beneficial insects that are resident in the field. So we weigh that into the equation when we're making decisions about what to spray and timing of the sprays.
Yeah, when managing for SWD, because the management tools are largely broad spectrum insecticides, we're concerned about those insecticides harming these natural populations of wild pollinators and other beneficial predatory insects that are probably saving us sprays elsewhere in the season to control for other pests. We could say, let's use this chemical instead of this much more, a much more targeted chemical that's going to affect SWD but not be as harmful to wild pollinators or other beneficial insects, versus a much more, potentially more powerful or more potent insecticide that would just have a knockdown effect across the board on all insect species.
If pesticide applications are necessary, there are a few things you can do to reduce the chance of exposure to bees. Communication with the beekeepers that may be working in the field is critical.
The placement of the hives is usually done in coordination with the grower and the beekeeper, and we may, relay information to the grower saying like, hey, maybe let's look at exploring a possibility of positioning these hives in a different location when you're working with your beekeeper.
When we have honeybees in the field, and if we have to make an application, we will communicate with the beekeeper about it and make sure that they're comfortable with the proximity of the hives in relation to the field that's being sprayed.
Instead of going along that very end row, spraying like the next row in, and allowing it to flow over. That way there's some buffer between where a spray is going on and those bees.
You can also change when you make applications to ensure that they are done when bees aren't active.
So we try to do all of our insecticide sprays for spotted Wing Drosophila at night, and that's obviously to prevent hurting the pollinators and other beneficial insects. We try to mow frequently. I guess there's a couple of reasons for that. One is we think it's more cost effective to mow quickly and do it multiple times than it is to go slow when the grass is taller and the other weeds are taller. But the other benefit of that is you get less of those flowers growing in the center aisles that are flowering. Some of the products we spray do have residue that could be left on those flowers. Even though we're spraying at night, they could still be damaging. But if we're mowing frequently, we're minimizing the risk there.
In addition to their pest management activities, many farmers are introducing practices in blueberries designed to specifically support pollinators.
There's different types of beneficial habitats. There could be, as simple as a single row. Like, say you have a row that you would have for blueberry plants. Instead of planting blueberries into them, you'd plant different perennial shrubs and bushes.
We recognize that some of these developments that we've done are very much a monoculture. There's not a whole lot growing out there besides the blueberries, and we do have grass cover crop. When it's grass, though, there's not a lot of other forage options there other than the blueberry flowers for the native pollinators around the farm. So in order to break up that huge monoculture of blueberries, we've decided to experiment and put hedgerows through the middle that rotate different types of flowering forages for the native bees and the native beneficial insects around the farm.
Replacing areas with beneficial habitat, or taking a section of the farm or some area and turning it into beneficial habitat, is a decision that's kind of made on a farm basis based on, what acreage they might have available in between their fields. And then there's a lot of other organizations that exist in this area, such as Oregon Tilth, the Xerces Society, who really kind of help to assist and consult on what plants might suit well for those given locations. And we try to work with them as much as possible too in doing any sort of these plantings.
Managing drift, we make sure that our applicators are aware of where we've put this beneficial insect pollinator habitat on farms. Like we have hedgerows through the middle, we have designated pollinator meadows on certain farms adjacent to the blueberry crop, and we make sure that our applicators, especially the whole farm staff, but our applicators in particular, understand the purposes of those hedgerows and the meadows, the pollinator meadows, so that they can be cognizant of that when they're spraying.
For beneficial planting, usually it takes 2 years for it to, it depends on what plants are being established. We will monitor for beneficials, and we've been tracking a lot of these places and collecting data on beneficial and wild pollinator insects. We really see benefits starting from just that first year of planting and then only building from there.
We have our clients are also very sustainability minded, and they're okay with putting money into something that might help promote something like the beneficial insects on the farm.
Growers are really adopting to new IPM strategies and thinking more about the whole farm ecosystem, more so than I've noticed in the past. I've been working in this industry for 10 years, and I've noticed an appreciable change. And a lot of things that I see going on are very, not just managed fields, but managed habitats.
So IPM is a really important part of what we're doing as farmers and organic farmers, and something we take very seriously.